Welcome back everyone. This is part 1 of a 3-part video series on quadratic equations. Now without further ado, let's jump right into this topic. So first of all, what is a quadratic equation? Well, a quadratic equation is an equation where the variable's highest power is equals to 2. In general form, the quadratic equation can be written as ax squared plus bx plus c is equals to 0. Notice that there are 3 constants a, b, and c. We can also observe that the power of variable x decreases from left to right. It is important to take note that in quadratic equations, the constant a cannot be 0. This is because if a is equals to 0, and if we substitute 0 into the general form, we would get bx plus c is equals to 0. That makes it a linear equation, not a quadratic equation. Now throughout this series, we will be learning how to solve quadratic equations with 4 methods. The first is trial and error. The second method is factorization. The third method is completing the square. And lastly, we will learn how to use the quadratic formula. Now it is important to note that when solving equations, the number of roots will always depend on the highest power of the variable. In the case of quadratic equations, the highest power of the variable is 2, so that means we must always have 2 roots. Now the first method is probably the least efficient of the 4 methods, and as the name suggests, we do this by trial and error. For example, let's determine the root of equation 2x squared plus 3x minus 2 is equals to 0. Now let's just draw 2 columns, one for x and the other for the output value. So let's just start with a random number. Let's say x equals to -3. So after some calculations, we get an output of 7. So our goal would be to obtain an output of 0 or a sign change, let's say from positive to negative. So let's keep trying with x equals to -2 and we get an output of 0. That means that -2 is one of the roots. Let's keep trying. So x equals to -1 and we get an output of -3. So let's keep trying. X equals to 0 and we get an output of -2. And x equals 1 and our output will be 3. So we can observe a sign change from -2 to +3. That means a root lies between 0 and 1. So let's take a rough guess and try x equals to half. So our output will be 2 times half square plus 3 times half minus 2, which gives us 2 times 1 over 4 plus 3 over 2 minus 2. So we can cancel 2 and 4. So we get 4 over 2 minus 2, which is 0. So that means our roots are -2 and half. Now let's move on to the second method, which is factorization. Let's try and solve a simple example. Let's say x squared equals to -8x minus 15. So when we're doing factorizations, the first step is to rearrange the equation in general form. So in this case, we get x squared plus 8x plus 15 is equals to 0. The second step is to find the factors of ax squared and put them into the brackets. So in this case, our factors would be x and x. So let's just put the factors into the brackets. Now we could have factors of -x and -x. However, it is much easier to keep the x values positive. So let's just leave that as it is and go on to the third step, which is to find the factors for the constant c. So in this case, our constant c is 15. So the possible factors are 15 and 1, -15 and -1, 5 and 3, and -5 and -3. After that, we have to determine the correct pair of factors. So let's try the first pair of factors, which are 15 and 1. You might ask, how exactly do we determine the correct pair of factors? Well, it's quite simple. First, we need to multiply the terms in the blue circles. Then do the same with the terms in the green circles. Now add them up together and we get 15x plus x is equals to 16x. Now compare 16x with the value of bx, and in this case bx is 8x. So 16x is not equals to bx. Therefore, these are not the pair of factors that we are looking for. So let's try negative 15 and negative 1, and after multiplying the terms and adding them up together, we get negative 15x minus x is equals to 16x. So these factors are also incorrect. So let's try 5 and 3, multiply the terms and add them up together, and we get 8x, which is equals to bx. So that means the correct factors are 5 and 3. The last step is to solve the equations in the brackets. We assume that both brackets have a value of 0, because anything that is multiplied by 0 will be 0. So let's start with the bracket on the left. So x plus 5 is equals to 0. That means x is equals to negative 5. Now to the bracket on the right. X plus 3 is equals to 0. So x is equals to negative 3. Now let's solve another problem where the constant c is equals to 0. So let's solve 3x squared equals to 4x by factorization. We can start out by arranging the equation in general form. So that gives us 3x squared minus 4x is equals to 0. The second step is to factor out x. So factor x out and we get x open bracket 3x minus 4 close bracket is equals to 0. So the last step is to solve the equations. So on the left, x is equals to 0. And on the right, 3x minus 4 is equals to 0. And after simplifying, we get x is equals to 4 over 3. Alright guys, that is all for part 1, and see you in part 2.